And I wonder, I was listening to your recent conversation with Jordan Peterson, and I was wondering why does he resist so much joining an organization or just saying I believe in God? Why is it like? Why does it have to be? Why does it have to be I act like I believe in God? And what's the difference? Is there a difference? I mean, if you act like you
Yeah.
believe in God, you believe in God, right?
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, it's just a belief. I mean, it's a belief. I guess there's a stage where you're living God, and that's something different. But anyway, I'd
well,
like to hear your insights or your thoughts
well,
about
I don't
that.
know. Like, I'm not in Jordan's mind. I'm
Yes.
not in his soul. But I think there are two things. One is that I think he's trying to be very authentic about his own process. He doesn't want to pretend. He wants to really say, well, if I believe this and I believe this, that's one. The second is, I think that he gets the conclusion of what it means to believe in God wrong, which is I mentioned it in the conversation. He seems to think that the first conclusion to believing in God or to acting as if you believe in God is an ethical one. And I don't think so. I think that it's worship, and worship is different. Worship is attention. Worship is a celebratory position.
Yeah.
And so it has more to do with prayer and worship than it does with, being a good person, because God is there watching you. That's almost like a weird.
That's of Protestantism, isn't it? Isn't that?
That's what it feels like to me, or like a misunderstood. Because Protestants aren't that bad. Like, it's a misunderstood. It seems like to me like a misunderstood kind of Protestantism, and so there's that. And then I think also he doesn't. I don't think he wants to be in a hierarchy, because that implies a lot of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Like, imagine you're like a teacher. You're almost like you're basically like a spiritual guru, but he's not that, but he's almost that. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I tell him, you need to join an organization, and then you have an authority.
Yeah.
Because once you do that, like, there are some things that if I said something completely wild, like, I would have a phone call from my bishop, and my bishop would tell me that, no, you can't say that. And I would have to obey if I want to remain Orthodox.
Right.
That's something. It's
just obedience that people do. I guess people don't want to be obedient to something.
But I don't think Jordan would think that out loud. But I think that there's something about, he's like a cowboy, like his personality.
Yeah.
He has that kind of sacred. What is he like? The idea of the supreme individual,
or maybe he just hasn't. Yeah. Well, he just hasn't met a teacher yet. I wonder if you have to meet a teacher who you can actually follow, or a person who embodies that, and he hasn't met that person yet who would get him in that process. So he has to do it all by himself, right? On some level,
that's possible. Like, he might need to meet a saint of some kind. Like, they exist, they're hard. There are not a lot of them, but there are some.
No, I think so too. Yeah, that's, I mean, I think I think there's something about what he's doing that he's actually revivifying, people's interest in spirituality, which is there's a strange paradox there.
Yeah, I agree that. I mean, I think that it's not spirituality. I would say, like, everybody's interested in.
Well, that's an ugly word. Well, religion, then we can say
religion is a dirty word. That's why I think he uses that word. He uses the word religion because it gets people turned off right away.
Yeah.
So he says, even though he's not really a religious person, but he'll say something like, I'm deeply religious, which turns people off because it implies, all kinds of things. It
implies the obedience, isn't that like what you were talking about? You have to be obedient to some higher principle than yourself, and that's like why a tradition. Spirituality is, in this California sense, is much more easier or softer or appealing to people who are not courageous.
Yeah, it really is a kind of psychological version of I do it makes me feel good, pretty much. I would say it's psychological more than it is spiritual in the specific sense, but it's like I do things, like I meditate, I do these things that make me feel good, make me healthy, basically. It's funny because when you read the saints in like every tradition, they'll like destroy themselves. They will destroy themselves to be in communion with the divine. They'll do anything, and so they don't have the idea of being healthy. They're like, I'll destroy all my body if I need to.
Yeah, I was reading.
I mean, not that you have to, but if
and Arena Tweeny was working with the Sufi master, and you know, basically it's a breakdown of the personality. A total breakdown of the personality is like the first step, and then there's then there's another 100 forms of torture, you know, before you get the you know, you get to the place. So it's very intense.
yeah, you can when you read like you read the monks in the Egyptian desert and these monasteries that got set up in the Egyptian desert, and as a modern person, like I find it unbearable. Like I read that stuff and I think of what the abbot was doing to the monks, and he would, you know, he would really like find the thing that the monk doesn't like, let's say, and then he would just like, you know, push his finger there to say like, this is your weak spot. I'm gonna just like, oh man, I don't think I could do it. I would drive me nuts. Like I'm too much of I wish I wasn't, but I'm too much of an individualist. That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, that's the point. I think maybe is that genuine religion practice is a challenge. It's an affront, and it's full of joys as well. But it's never can never be sugar coated. I don't think.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, people think that meditation is about relaxing and being calm, and I'm sorry, but that's total bullshit. You know, go to a Zen monastery in Japan and see what that's like. And you wake up at 2:30 in the morning and you go in a cold room and you meditate in the dark for 4 hours, and somebody comes by and beats you with a stick, you know. And then you go and meet the Zen master and he kicks your ass a little bit, and that happens for 10 years, you know. And then after that, you might learn something. That's how it kind of works, really. That's not like being Zen, being calm, being, you know, being relaxed, having a nice aesthetic around you, and whatever people think Zen is just totally ridiculous.
Having Buddhist statues in spas, like
well, there you go. Yeah.
That's pretty much what that's my vision of Western like Buddhism. It's like and that's why I always joke, and I'm not totally joking when I say my Catholic grandmother was more of a Buddhist than a lot of the Buddhists that I meet, let's say, in like every day, you know, in this world right now. When people just kind of randomly say, well, I'm a Buddhist, and I'm like, really? Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I could introduce you to a few people.
To a few real Buddhists.
To a few real Buddhists, including my own teacher, who's very fierce and challenging, and would probably kick your ass, John, if you made a mistake. So, but he would love you too.
He would love me and kick my ass.
Yes. Okay. So one question I just had written down here that just popped up is like, so are things getting better or are they getting worse in the world?
In the world?
Everywhere. Like what's happening?
Yeah.
Are we like the traditionalist views, kind of like, I guess the traditionalist schools with Rene Guénon and all those guys, they seem to think we're headed, just modernity is endless fragmentation leading to death and fragmentation, and it's just cycling into this, you know, we're in the Kali Yuga, and it's another 1,000 years of darkness, and there's, you know, and then a new cycle will begin. But I do think we're kind of fucked.
Yeah.
Excuse my language.
So it's interesting. Like I've been thinking about this a lot, because I think that my natural tendency is to think that way. Like not the Kali Yuga stuff, but to think that things are getting worse and that we're moving towards like a total collapse.
Yeah.
But I've had people really challenge me on that, in the sense that, you know, for example, like if you look at Western society, you know, it's kind of losing its values, but it does take care of the poor in a way that no one ever has in the history of humanity.
Yeah.
And so this is an objective truth, where the poor are cared for in ways that has never happened. And so, and the same thing is like, we do have a virtue of kindness and a virtue of respect towards the other that is quite strong in our culture, even though we're kind of evacuating the source of that. So there's all these weird things going on. There's a sense in like when Christ, but it definitely is there are some things that are definitely getting worse in terms of, you can see the fragmentation, you can see the breakdown, you can kind of see it coming. And Christ talks about the idea of, the wheat and the tares growing up together. And I think that's probably the best way for me now to understand it, is that there's a sense in which as time moves forward, the wheat is growing and getting ripe, but the tares are among them. And it's hard to completely disentangle them until the reaping, let's say, until the end. And so I think that that's something that we're seeing, is that we're seeing both happen at the same time. And there's like also a sense in which the idea of the last wine, which Christ talks about in different images, not just the image of the wedding of Cana, but there are different images where he talks about the surprise of the last thing being better than which was before. And I think that that's also something which seems to be, it's possible that what's preparing itself is a surprise in that sense, where out of this chaos is actually going to rise up some very powerful jewels, like some pearls are going to appear in these last moments. So
yeah, I was listening to this Jewish rabbi, and in fact, because the Jews are waiting for the Messiah to come, they're this very optimistic about the future. It's like, it's getting better. It's actually where heaven and coming down to earth, and they have this mentality somehow. So I thought that it's definitely there. Like, it's interesting. I mean, because I'm doing this video on the mark of the beast, and I'm doing more videos on Revelation. And so there really is, like, in Revelation, these two images that are kind of juxtaposed to each other, which is the beast and the whore together. Let's say the beast and the whore, and then the heavenly Jerusalem. And there's a sense in which, the beast and the whore is like the worst aspect of civilization. Yeah.
And then the heavenly Jerusalem is like the best aspect of civilization, because it says that in the heavenly Jerusalem, all the glories of all the nations will be gathered into the city, which is a beautiful image, a sense that all the good things of all these nations will be gathered into the heavenly Jerusalem.